Why is it so hard to connect with your inner child? And how do you begin? Have you ever been told to connect with your inner child and quietly thought, I don't even know where to start? Or perhaps more honestly, I don't feel anything at all, because here's the reality. For many people, the inner child isn't something they feel connected to. It's something they've learned to move away from. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. You see, when we talk about the inner child, this psychic entity, we're not talking about something abstract or imagined. We're talking about a very real emotional part of our mindset, the part that holds your feelings, your needs, your vulnerability, and your early experiences of connection or disconnection. And if those early experiences involved feeling unseen, unheard, or emotionally alone, then it makes perfect sense that you would have learned to distance yourself from that part of you. In many ways, the disconnection you feel now is not the problem, it was the solution. But because as a child, if your emotional world wasn't met with safety, understanding, or consistency, then staying connected to those feelings would have been overwhelming. So you adapted. You learned to suppress, to minimize, to push down what you felt, and over time that becomes automatic. Not just something you did, but something you became. And this is where people often get stuck, because they're told, connect with your inner child, be more compassionate with yourself, listen to your feelings, but no one acknowledges just how difficult that can be when you spent a lifetime doing the opposite. So if that's you, I want to say this clearly, there's nothing wrong with you. The distance you feel makes sense. But here's the important part. What once protected you may now be keeping you stuck. Because when you disconnect from your inner child, you don't just disconnect from the emotional pain, you also disconnect from your needs, your joy, your spontaneity, your sense of self. And without that connection, it becomes very difficult to know who you are or what truly matters to you. So how do we begin to rebuild that relationship? Not by forcing it, not by suddenly trying to feel everything at once, but by approaching your inner child in the same way you would approach a real child who has been hurt, gently, consistently, and with patience. Because if a child has learned that it's not safe to express how they feel, they're not going to open up just because you tell them to. They need to feel safe first. And this is where your role begins to change. Instead of judging your emotions or trying to fix them, you begin simply noticing them. You might ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What should I feel? Not what makes sense, but what am I actually feeling? And at first, the answer might be, I don't know. And that's okay. Because you're not just trying to access feelings, you're rebuilding trust. And trust takes time. Another way to begin is to shift how you speak to yourself, because whether you realize it or not, there is already a voice inside you that is speaking. And for many people, that voice is frankly critical, dismissive, or demanding. That's what we call the inner critic. And although we're not going into depth on that here, it's important to recognize that when that voice is loud, it becomes very difficult for the inner child to feel safe enough to come forward. So part of connecting with your inner child is beginning to soften how you respond to yourself. Instead of saying, why am I like this? You might begin to say, something in me is struggling right now. Instead of, I shouldn't feel this way, you might say, it makes sense that I feel this way. This is not about getting it right, getting it perfect. It's about changing the tone, because your inner child is not listening to your words. It's responding to how those words feel. You can also begin to imagine that there is a younger version of you sitting beside you, not in a forced or artificial way, but just allowing yourself to consider, if that younger version of me was here right now, what might they be feeling? What might they need? And importantly, how would I want to respond to them? Because often the compassion we struggle to give ourselves flows much more naturally when we imagine giving it to a child. And over time, something begins to shift, not all at once, but gradually moments of awareness, moments of softness, moments where instead of turning away from yourself, you stay, even briefly. And those moments matter. Because every time you stay present with yourself, without judgment, you are sending a new message to your inner child. You are no longer alone. I'm here now. And that is where the healing begins. Not in dramatic breakthroughs, but in small, consistent moments of connection. So if you've been struggling to connect with your inner child, don't see that as failure. See it as a reflection of what you've been through and are maybe still struggling with, and begin where you are, gently, patiently, and with the understanding that this isn't about becoming someone new. It's about reconnecting with someone who has been there all along, waiting. And in doing so, you don't just heal the past, you begin to rediscover who you are. If you'd like help connecting with your inner child, visit my website, book a free discovery call. Let's see what's possible.